Highlander Heart, and as you can see, things have taken a bit of a turn for the worse. The ozone layer just kind of like conked out, and now we're living under the shield. It's a sad time for us all. Maybe that gives you a bit of a clue to what we'll be talking about today. I'm Grant.
I'm Rob, and that's Connor. Yeah.
Hey, Connor.
And I am Joe, stuck on the planet Zeist. So
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, that's what happens during lockdown. You were stranded. It's fine.
What's the quarantine time coming back from Zeist?
365 years last time I checked.
No, it's almost 500 years apparently. So I don't know.
Wow.
Well, time is relative.
So yeah, you guessed it. This episode we're talking about Highlander 2, and I mean that's something that not everybody really wants to talk about, or at least if they do, it's usually with with grumpy faces and pitchforks and things like that. So with that in mind, I think this is part of the issue why you'll notice we don't have a fourth box this episode. Very hard to find people who want to talk about their time in Highlander 2. But but as a kind of a pseudo, I don't know if you remember, Rob, the last night that we were at the gathering in Los Angeles. It was one of those nights where, and sorry, Joe, this is we're just rubbing it in your face now. It was one of those evenings where so we were sat at a table, and there was Rob and myself and John Mosby, who was in our first episode, Kareem Michael Damashki, who was in our second episode, and John Byerly, who would have, I think, probably without doubt, have been in this episode. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But he was such a sort of tour de force within the sort of the Highlander fandom, and such a good writer. And so, since we can't have him here, he wrote a lovely piece on Highlander 2, and I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you now. He said, of Highlander's 4 film sequels, Highlander 2 takes the biggest risks, wields the biggest imagination, boasts the biggest ambition, and remains to this day the only one that feels bigger than the original. And I don't think you can argue with that, can you?
No.
Go on.
Yeah.
No matter what you think about it, no matter how you feel, whether you think it's good, bad, or you're indifferent, that statement is true. So I think what we're going to do this episode is we're going to share our thoughts about it. We're going to discuss the many, many, many different versions of the film, and perhaps even sort of discuss maybe what we would have done were it up to us to make a sequel that didn't involve aliens, and also find out if all of our ideas are the same, which usually happens. So that will be coming up in the return of the 5-minute pitch featuring the Guardian. He'll be back to stop you from going over 5 minutes. So let's kick off the show with why we love, or maybe don't love, or maybe a bit of both, Highlander 2. And Rob, I'm going to start with you just because you're at the top.
Oh, well, I mean, basically, I am the definitive love and hate guy. I love the movie and simultaneously hate the movie at the same time. It's very confusing. It's not great for the mental health. No. But no, I love that. I love that film. It was Sean Connery and Christopher Lambert back together again. If you hate the movie, that's fine. I get it. But there's one part of the movie you can never hate, and that's all the scenes, the little about it that there was with Sean and Christopher Lambert. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that is just, the whole film is worth that moment.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? When they are together on screen. But other than that, I mean, the film was big. It was big budget for the time. It was big sets. It was big explosions. It was big. It was big. Unfortunately, it never really added anything to the mythology apart from the what? I mean, do you know what I mean?
They're aliens.
Yeah, they're
Yes.
aliens. Like, this is not a conspiracy website. It's not one of those weird out of the world kind of things you come up with. They're aliens. It's like, no, I don't want that. But saying that, I did love the film. I did love the. I mean, it wasn't a hugely terrible film, and it's renegade and it's in its renegade form. It's pretty good. But if they had done Aliens from Another Planet as a renegade version, I think that'd have been better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do love the film.
What
slightly.
did you think when you saw it for the first time?
Well, I'd recently become a Highlander fan by having watched. I knew the second one was coming out, so I watched the first one, and then I watched the second one quite close together, and I was pretty damn confused, to say the least. And I never really gave it much thought at the time, because when you're actually 16, I was 16 at the time, so I was sitting there watching it, and there was more and more movies to watch and stuff to. So I didn't have time to ponder. Nowadays, you've got time to ponder and you think and stuff like that. But at the time, I was pretty disappointed.
Yeah. Oh, that's a fair comment. How about you, Joe?
I'm sort of in the love-hate camp as well. Honestly, my kind of hate started with the fact that, Highlander was a fantastic movie, as we've discussed, and a near perfect movie, and left no room for a sequel. And the early 90s when this movie came out, I was kind of going through a phase where I kind of fell out of fandom. I had a lot of real life things going on that kind of kept me from really keeping up with what was going on in movies and TV. And, back pre-internet, you had to actually go and find that information in magazines and things like that. So I honestly had no idea that there was a Highlander sequel coming out. And I literally drove by a theater every day on my way home from work, and just happened one day to drive by and nearly wrecked because I saw this poster that had Lambert and Connery on it with Highlander on it. And I actually looped back around, went to the theater and asked about it. And they're like, oh yeah, it's coming out on Friday. I was like, okay, this will be interesting. And I went and saw it opening day. Even when I was going in, I asked the folks at the theater if I could have the poster when the first run was done, and they said yes. And unfortunately, I don't have it anymore. But yeah, I was one of those that was subjected to the U.S. Theatrical version of the movie initially, obviously, and left extremely puzzled and confused by what I just saw. And honestly, I'll tell you this: the whole thing with Zeiss and all that in and of itself doesn't bother me. My whole question was, why do you need to explain this? I don't know. I didn't understand why, especially second film out, we needed to have an explanation for the immortals. It didn't. I was like, it's a kind of magic. Same thing with the swords just showing up out of the blue. It's a kind of magic. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we not only had to explore what happened, but we kill off, the love interest from the first movie with a body double, basically. And there was this whole edited mess of a movie that made no sense to me. So as a film fan and a person that has made their own amateur movies and things like that, it was an incomprehensible mess, and I was just kind of bewildered at what I just saw.
Yeah.
Then again, a few years later, finally getting to see the director's cut and then eventually the finished Renegade version, like, oh, well, that makes a whole lot more sense now. And that's when I kind of grew into my love for the movie. Even with the director's cut, I still wasn't sold on the whole, even at that point coming from the past instead of Zeiss and the whole weird explanation for it. I still thought, if this wasn't a Highlander movie, it'd still actually be a really fun sci-fi film. I mean, you have explosions, you have action, you have Sean Connery, you have actors that we know well now chewing the scenery left and right, and it was like, what's not to love about it? And over the years, I've really thought about it and really come to the appreciation of it I have today, and would say, you know what, it actually, to me, fits well. And if, everything had stopped there, I'd have been, today, been okay with just getting the first movie in this one. So I have gone from a severe hatred of it to a I kind of love this movie. I think it's okay after all.
Yeah. So. No, that's awesome. I think I kind of sit somewhere in between all of that in a way. So my first experience was, I mean, by the time the sequel was coming out, and I somehow knew, I mean, I used to probably get film magazines and things like that, so I must have known that it was coming out before I saw the poster in the theater. But I remember seeing the poster in the theater with my then girlfriend, and so we'd gone to see something else, and there was this poster, and I sort of exclaimed that I wanted to prostrate myself in front of this poster, and she thought I meant something else, and that was a whole other thing. But ultimately, which probably wasn't far wrong anyway, to be honest. But ultimately,
let's be fair.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, quickening moment. But in seeing,
rated R.
Yes.
But in seeing that, I think that really cemented what had been sort of a burgeoning realization in me that Highlander was it for me. Like that was kind of the thing that I'd kind of really kind of focused all of my favorite film love into something, and I'd watched it multiple times by that point. So when I realized it was coming out, there was this huge anticipation, just huge, building up to that point. And so I was at college at the time when it came out, and I remember I bunked off college, which I never did for any other time. I went to the first screening of the movie, and this was in Milton Keynes at the Point Cinema, which was the UK's first ever multiplex. And as I sat down, I noticed, pretty sure 2 rows down in front of me was the horror writer Sean Hudson, which I tried to contact to get him on, but it didn't happen. Never mind. But I'm fairly certain it was him, and so he obviously was a big fan too. And I was so ready for it, just so excited, just couldn't wait. And so I watched it, and I went, yeah, this is great. And I came out, I went and got a drink from McDonald's, and then I went back in and I went and saw the second viewing. And I watched it again, and I came out and go, yeah, this is great. And then slowly over time, I started to realize how awful it was, and how much of a slap in the face it was to the original. But it took me a while to get there. And I think the reason being is for some of those things that you said, Rob. For a start, it's one of those movies where, and maybe this is just me, because I'm a sort of a creative by trade and designer, whatever, that it's one of those films where the visuals, you could pause the film at any moment, and you could take that paused frame and put it up on a wall, and it would look like a picture. Like every single frame was gorgeous. So that the cinematography and the production design was, for that time was pretty incredible. It was sort of on a par, I believe, in terms of the set, the size of the set with Gotham in Tim Burton's Batman. It was like a super big deal. And then, as you said, Rob, having Lambert and Connery on screen again was just beyond anything, and it was just so excited to see them back together again. But for me, as somebody who was toying at the idea of growing my hair long and just desperately wanted to be Connor McLeod, the moment where he steps out of the flames and is this young Connor again is just such a amazing kind of moment. And it was filled with lots of these little moments that built up to me being able to ignore all of the rubbish bits And it's only over time that you start to kind of assimilate those and take them on board and really kind of think, okay, oh, maybe, oh, yeah, no, yeah, there's problems with this. But I think my overruling fanboy won for the most part for a long time, even down to the music. And people will probably criticize the music for being essentially kind of like a sort of slightly banal kind of like mixtape of sort of random rock music. But, you know, I'd had that CD soundtrack for probably weeks before the movie came out. I'm fairly sure I got that right. I'm fairly sure I'd been listening to that a lot. So that by the time it came out, then I was hearing the music in the movie, and you know, it was it all just, but yeah. So I liked it for a long time, and it didn't put me off by any means. Sort of with my love of Highlander, and only through, I suppose, once I wound up eventually becoming a film critic, that you start to think maybe, I started to think maybe a little bit more critically, and then you kind of really understand that actually narratively it was, you know, awful. And then thankfully there was the Renegade cut, which was great, and I embraced that for as much as it was. But still at this point, with that Renegade cut, there it is, you are still, you still get the sense that that they are trying desperately to pull it back into the canon. You know, even once Highlander 3 came out, you know, it's still canon because no, they're just from the past. It's okay. We can still include it in all of that. And it just didn't sit right, and it just didn't work, and it was frustrating. But having got to past 3, past 4, past 5, we're now at a point where Highlander 2 is a kind of I don't know the best word to describe it. It's something that sits outside of the mythology, even though there's not a lot of canon going on within the franchise in general. They're all alternate timelines, basically.
Yeah.
But Highlander 2 even sits beyond that to a degree. And as such, I love it. Because it has all the great stuff that I loved about it when I saw it. All that stuff with, you know, Christopher Lambert just being Christopher Lambert, like, you know, plus. At his coolest, you know, Sean Connery, you know, doing Ramirez, their, you know, camaraderie. It's got swords, it's got explosions, it's got this, you know, beautiful cinematography, all that stuff that I love about it. And yes, this, you know, there's parts of the story that are, you know, rubbish, but, you know, the message was there, you know, about, you know, eco stuff. And so there's still a lot to like. I think you just have to, as most people have, I think now, just accept that it sits just off center of the Highlander canon and mythology, and it's just something that you can learn to sort of enjoy in and of itself. That's kind of my take on it, anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I mean, compared to some films of today that you look at and think, I'm never going to enjoy this ever again.
Yeah.
I mean, we can still talk about it however many years later. Yeah. And quite literally just go, yes, I enjoyed that for what it was. It was trying. There was some things that were trying with big budgets and all that got in the way, but they were trying to do something completely different within the mythology and sort of sidestepped the mythology a little bit and added in something we didn't like. But yeah, it was like, I enjoyed the movie. It was good.
Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the overruling thing, as Joe pointed out, the overruling issue with it, really, the crux of it, is the attempt to explain immortality.
Yeah, that never made sense to me because much like, you know, Lucas found out with the Star Wars prequels, much like I think to a certain extent, producers of Doctor Who are discovering with the Time War, is these mythic things that you talk about in a narrative, when you actually decide to flashback and show them, they're never going to live up to everybody's expectations. And I think, you know, you're going to have degrees of success. I think in this case, you know, left a lot of people scratching their heads in all of the versions. But I just, again, like I said, I didn't see a need to explain the immortals. Just leave it as this mythic thing because you've made them in the first movie kind of these mythic creatures in a sense. Leave it that way. And so, yeah, I mean, and much like, as well, I'm sure we'll discuss at some point, the folks that made the source also discovered and that was the other thing too. It's like, so your second movie, you're going to try to explain everything, and then you're going to learn the error of your ways until, you know, another couple movies later, and then you're going to decide to try it again. But, you know, okay.
Well, I mean, I'm completely in a different way. I'm thinking you can do a good movie and explain things. You just have to be coherent.
Well, yes.
Yeah. It helps.
You have to think about it for a while and then do it, as opposed to make it up as you go along.
Well, yeah.
And sidestep it, kind of thing. But yeah.
No, absolutely. And the explanation that they used, I think, was very much of its time. It was a very 90s thing, you know, this idea of like an ancient civilization which is depicted beautifully. I mean, you know, again, depicted beautifully. I mean, that's the renegade stuff, but, you know, in your background, Joe. Yet they use, you know, machine guns, and, you know, yet they have technology, but it was a very kind of 90s kind of, almost like kind of comic booky, you know, possibly kind of anime sort of just mix that was very much of the time in the 90s. I just watched and reviewed this week's Split Second. I don't know if anybody remembers that, the movie set in sort of 2008 London, where the Thames is flooded, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But, you know, he's just like walking around and, you know, in a leather trench coat with a, you know, gun and a thing, and the monster was, you know, it was just a very kind of just stylized kind of approach, which was very much of that time, where there was, like, you know, 2000 AD, and you know, with and Judge Dredd with Stallone, and it just it very almost cyberpunky kind of vibe to it, and they just, you know, for I think some of those reasons wanted to apply that to it, maybe to make it relevant to the audience, maybe because it was just kind of in part of the zeitgeist at that point. You know, where the immortals come from. Hey, wouldn't it be great if they came from an ancient civilization on a distant world, and they all use machine guns, you know, to counteract the idea that, you know, in the original movie they're in modern day, but they're using swords. You know, it's kind of like a flip on that, and, you know, so they got all these kind of, like, you know, ideas and sort of threw them in, but never really thought to think, well, is this actually what anybody wants to see?
The Zeiss explanation, especially the part where they said, we're going to send you to Earth where you'll be reborn as an immortal. I'm like, that totally fits in with what they talked about in the series about all immortals are foundlings. It's like, well, that makes sense. Where do they come from? They come from another planet, and they're reincarnated on Earth as immortals. I had no problem with that.
Except they were already called McLeod and Ramirez.
Yes.
That annoyed the hell out of me.
I've read Scottish history. I know a bit about Scottish history, and I remember that we came from another planet.
Well, I've said that for years. I mean.
Well, so the revised version of them coming from 500 years in the past, or the distant past, depending on the version, I'm like, well, that makes even less sense to me, because so you win the prize and you can grow old in whatever present day you win the prize, or you can go back to the past. So then what do? Do you try to change everything that went badly in Earth's history going forward? That part was like, what?
Well, no. I mean, and there's tons of holes where, you know, like, so, you know, Katana sends him ahead and whatever, and then decides to, oh, well, you know, he's like, McLeod's nearly dead. Oh, well, you guys go off and kill him. Oh, made him immortal again. Oh, no. You know, you know, there's very little sense.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that bothered me about, I mean, when it was originally released, and it was the normal version that was released here, they were sent from another planet, but in the dialogue, it's you're mortal there, but you're immortal here on planet Earth. but Katana's, it's been 500 years and Katana's not only alive, but he's wearing the same outfit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So many
There
watts.
was so many holes, and it was beyond ridiculous. I think that is because they went big,
Mm.
but they never went big on script or story. It kind of, they had I mean, Sean did the Medicine Man in 1990, where they were doing the whole environmental thing with the rainforests and stuff. So I get why he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Then that kick.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the film itself was just, I mean, if you sit and watch the film and think about it a lot, it'll break you.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't think too hard. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, it will
Exactly.
properly break you.
Yeah.
And I was sitting rewatching this the other day for research purposes, and I'd forgotten how badly it was edited.
Mm.
Like, they break into the prison, Connor starts putting on a uniform from Max, and then the first half of the fight, he's back to wearing a long coat, his trousers and his dress shoes.
Yeah.
Then at the end of the fight, he's wearing his prison uniform again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're just like, he's got two different swords. It's a complete mess, editing wise.
Yeah.
Well, he has a discussion with Virginia Matt Louise, before that, and his shirt's already torn. He's all dirty.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second, and then, like you said, it goes into the first part of the fight, and he's wearing, and then they both change clothes and change swords, and it's just like, what is going on here? I was just that completely pulled me out of the movie when I saw it for the first time. So I'm like, I don't understand what's going on here.
No, absolutely. It's literally like they took because especially towards the end, they took, there's an action sequence there. Let's just take that action sequence and shove it at the end with the other one. So there's
No one will
two
know.
back-to-back sword fights. And nobody will notice. Yeah, we'll just put that in there. Well, this brings us on perfectly to talking about the different versions, of which there have been many. So Rob, why don't you talk us through literally all of those versions?
Well, if I can remember most of them, there's three main versions that I remember. You've got the original Quickening, we're from Planet Zeist, we make soap. Then there's the Renegade version, which I remember fondly. It's saving Highlander 2 for the most part. And then they've got the Renegade version that they've jazzed up with fancy effects, which I quite like, actually. Back in the day when you watched the first film, as we were talking about, it was so badly edited and it was so confusing, and it was about 100 and what was it, 1 hour 25, something really, like, it wasn't a proper movie. It felt like there was more there and there wasn't. So we've talked a lot about kind of bad editing and all that kind of stuff. But the first version of that was the hands down the worst. Simply because they cut out so much to make the runtime. Like, the Bond company took out so much so they could get more showings to make more money, that it made no sense. I mean, to anybody, even diehard fans, you can't reconcile yourself with that one. But yeah, there was rumours abound many years ago after that there was going to be a new cut, a producer's cut or a director's cut, called the Renegade version. And I don't think, because that's to this day has still never been released in the UK. Europe has it on various DVDs over the years. We've not had it.
No.
So we have been stuck with this for many years. The only time I think the first time we saw the Renegade version was when me and Grant went to the US and did The Gathering 3. We picked up the videos. We bought the director's cuts of the 10th anniversary of the first film and the Renegade cut and the second on VHS. It was like, yes,
Yeah.
And then subsequently realised we can't play them on our video player, so we had to get them converted.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, I'm home, it was a long trip from the US, I've got my videotape and I can't watch the blooming thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the Renegade version was so much better. It added in like a half hour of new footage. I think they'd shot some extra stuff for this, like the chase, the car chase and stuff. I think they'd filmed that after,
Right.
for that particular release, for what I can remember. But yeah, they had completely re-edited it, added in all this new footage, and basically saved the movie
Yeah.
from what it was.
Yeah. So
and
bits back in the right places.
Yeah, everything was the fight in the middle was back in the middle.
Yeah.
Instead of being tailed onto the end like we were talking about a few minutes ago, there was the end fight was properly situated. You could hear dialogue, you could hear everything. It was properly done. Like they went back and fixed everything as far as I'm concerned. But they did change the one big thing, that there were aliens. Now, I remember saying that was a good idea, but you quickly realised that in that version, the Renegade version, they never had any plans other than aliens. Because all the dialogue that was in the Quickening version had Sean talking about, remember the planet we came from, all those, that the war's still there, it's going on. Basically, they just cut out all of the dialogue that referenced another planet, and basically put a tagline at the front saying "a very long time ago."
Yeah.
And you're just like, this isn't Star Wars. It's not a galaxy far, far away anymore. But just a long time ago. There you go. That's the explanation. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, they still had McLeod and Ramirez in that version. You know, nobody's names were changed. It wasn't miraculously changing the film. It was just adding in most of what they cut and then taking out the references to an alien planet. So yeah, it was a lot better. But yeah, I mean, from what I remember back in the day, when Grant did the explanation, the breakdown of all the film cuts, and there was all these tiny little fonts written. You need to have a magnifying glass to see. There was various versions that had different things, or something was longer, something was shorter. I think the most telling thing, I don't know if this footage actually exists, but there's supposed to be a scene where Ramirez asks for his sword back.
Yeah.
I've seen the photos of it, but I've never seen the footage.
No.
And I don't actually know where that would be, because it's not in any version of DVDs I could find.
No.
But yeah, there was little bits were taken away, little bits were added in. Didn't make much, didn't change very much.
No.
Until you get to the jazzy special effects version made many years later, where they basically edited the entire color palette of the shield that Grant's sitting under right now.
OG.
Because the entire film had a blue color palette.
Yeah.
It was very James Cameron. Back in the day, nice blue palettes and stuff like that, and they're sitting completely under a red shield with no red lighting whatsoever hitting anybody. But yeah, that last version was, I think, the best version. Simply because they updated all the visual effects. They tried to do it in HD. I don't think it's proper HD. I think it's an upscale. But it looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, going back to the shield thing, I think it's a shame that they changed that, because I think the color. I mean, I slightly oversaturated my real background, as you can.
Yes.
Yeah. But even so, it gave a very kind of sickly feel, a very sort of oppressive almost. Just and kind of spoke a little bit of the kind of the heat, and you just felt everybody was like hot, like sweaty messes, and suddenly having this kind of like cool futuristic kind of blue hue kind of sort of fought against that, which is a shame.
Well, I liked the red shield, but I preferred it when they reimagined it, the blue version.
Yeah.
'Cause it made sense within the film.
Yeah. Sure.
I was, like I said, I was watching the quickening version, and Sean's on the plane, looking out the window, wondering how things fly.
Yeah.
You can see the shield, the big red shield over the top, but you can also see it under the bottom of the plane.
Yeah.
And I wasn't entirely sure whether we're flying through a gap.
Yeah.
Right. How do planes work with a shield since it doesn't go above mountains?
Exactly. There's that element to it, but I mean, the stuff they added into the Renegade version, they added in the chase scene, which was broad daylight,
Yes.
and they never changed the lighting for it.
Wow.
Under a shield, not red shield, not a blue shield. It was just, it was made to look hot, and it was Argentina, so it was going to be hot anyway.
Yeah.
But it was made to look hot, but the lighting didn't match. And after the chase scene, they climbed through a tiny gap to get above the shield to see daylight. They already had it while they were in the car.
Yes.
And you're just like, what? But you get that reshoots and stuff like that, they never had money to colour it or do something fancy with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess the best thing they could have done was it would have been a nightmare. You wouldn't have been able to shoot it in like Twilight or like the Magic Hour or whatever to try and get that glow that they needed. There's only so much you can do with grading, but yeah, it's it is a shame. But I think
so they did the Doctor Who thing. It was like, right, we need to film a chase. We'll do it in a quarry.
Yes. Yeah.
That is it. There's no set. There's no traffic. There's nothing to control. We'll do it where nobody is, and quickly shoot this thing.
Yeah. I don't think I realized until the spruced up special effect version of the Renegade, the latest one, just in watching it finally in DVD on a larger screen, just how beautifully shot and how awesome the sound design is for this thing. I mean, it's like just I don't know. The sounds are great, and it looked like you were saying, Grant. You could pause it at any moment, snap the picture, and frame it and put it on the wall because it just. I mean, I think it's a tribute to it that there are a couple of special effects scenes of quickenings that are used in the opening credits of Highlander the series.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely, yeah. No, if you got it, use it. Absolutely. We have to address the elephant in the room. The elephant that is floating in the air at the end.
Oh yeah,
inviting ladies to come up to the sky with them.
I think that was one of the most beautifully shot, beautifully written pieces of cinema in the history of the world. Did anybody buy that?
Kept a straight face through that. Wow.
I'll do my Sean Connery eyebrow raise. No, that was. I remember reading about that in the magazine, and I never saw it. I don't think we saw it until the deleted scenes came out in one of the DVDs. I don't think because with VHS you don't get deleted scenes; you just get a tape. But yeah, it was out in the DVD many years ago, and you're just watching this thing unfold and think, who the hell wrote that?
Well, and what is happening? What is he just going to sort of swim through space back to Zeist from, how does...
I don't know if anybody American watching this or Joe will get this, but it looked like he just eaten his ready break.
He was glowing.
That glow. That might be a UK thing.
I think it is.
Yeah. But yeah, it's properly awful. It's like it was never a finished scene. It was just, this is what we're trying to do. We'll cut and paste and we'll affect it and all that kind of stuff. But it was just a horrible, let's go back to my planet. You're just like,
yeah.
Why? Why would you?
No, I know. It was crazy. I remember the first time I saw that scene, and it was before the Renegade cut. because I saw a version, I think I might even still have it, I'm not sure, on VHS, that was like a bootleg of Highlander 2. But that sequence was still against blue screen.
Yeah.
But it was included in the film. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this is crazy. Like, what is going on? I just don't understand. Like, wow. Okay.
I mean, when I read about that in the magazine when you did it, it was I think you'd mentioned it was a European video or a video. It was on VHS in Europe somewhere.
Yeah.
That had some slightly more footage.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find that for love nor money.
No.
But that was like first time I seen it was on DVD and deleted scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I don't know. It was like it was uncomfortable to watch. When something is so cringeworthy.
You know what though? I believe isn't it referred to as the fairy tale ending?
Yeah, the fairy tale ending. Yeah.
Which with a kind of magic, it fits. It actually works.
Well, yeah, exactly. And again, within the confines of accepting this as its own thing and as a fairy tale or whatever, then fine. Float off into the sky and turn into stars if you want.
I mean, really, by that point in the movie, you're going to buy anything if you're on board. So, I mean, what's one more unrealistic, crazy thing?
Okay, bringing it back down to reality here and having a nitpick with the film. Katana jumps in a time machine or a space travel machine, glows, and then bounces somewhere into the planet. How did Connor do that without a big machine?
Right, he just floated, just like
yeah.
Didn't he cast for the bloody ghost?
Maybe he really died and he's a ghost. So.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe he
actually won.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's still the thing is, right? The idea is that the Connor Ramirez says to Connor, the battle is still just because there's even 500 years later, the battle is still going on. So Connor's basically said, "Come with me to a war zone,
and we can live happily ever after."
Yeah,
yes,
he was doing really well with that gun.
Yeah,
off the guards in the film. So come to a battlefield where you will have no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
It's definitely hot, and you may die.
Unless you're immortal there, in which case you could always come back and then be immortal there.
Send more guys here.
People from there back to there, in which case they can kill you and make you immortal there.
And not.
Well, I know that we're not the only ones who had a bit of a problem with it when it came out. There was quite a backlash from of critics and things as well. I know you've been looking into that, Joe.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say my favorite quote, and I understand his point of view on this, having seen it when it first came out. The venerable Roger Ebert, famously or infamously said that he found the movie the most hilariously incomprehensible movie I've seen in many a long day. A movie almost awesome in its badness. I didn't agree with that last part the first time I saw it. I just thought it was terrible. And many other critics at the time were just kind of bewildered by this mess of a movie. I mean, it's obviously a classic example of where the people backing the movie should not be involved in the creative process, because I guess the whole story is, of course, that they went over budget and over time, and the people paying the money said, no, we're taking this movie and we're going to make a movie out of what you have. You're done. And I don't know which of the many editors credited on the movie to blame, and to think that any editor worth his salt would edit a movie together like that and go, yep, sure, here you go. I don't know, maybe they did it as a joke and said, well, I tell you what, I'll edit it so badly that they'll have to go back to the filmmakers and let them finish their movie. And maybe that was the ploy, and it backfired.
Yeah, maybe.
I think that's a thing that happens all the time now. Make a terrible edit, show them it, they'll beg you to fix it.
I mean, because here's the thing. I mean, honestly, 99.9% of the time, if you're a production company making a movie or a TV series that's not Galactic in 1980, you don't intentionally set out to make a bad film or a bad TV show. Nobody does that. I mean, they're really trying to make the best they can with the budget they have and the actors they have. And you hope at the end of the day that you have enough stuff shot that you can edit together a really good movie and make some money out of it and entertain some people. So, I always cringe when quote unquote true fans, trademark, say, people make Star Wars or Highlander or Doctor Who or any of the popular franchises, that whatever the latest iteration is, spitting in the face of fans and designed to make fans angry or make people angry. It's like, no one's setting out to make anything bad, much less make people angry. They're really trying to make the best version of what they have. And obviously, as we discussed in Highlander 2, that kind of choice was taken away from them early. I mean, who knows? Maybe if they kept making it, or they went to edit it, maybe this whole Zeiss thing or from the past thing is ludicrous. We should rethink that, or we should either just pull that out of it, or reshoot some other flashbacks. Maybe common sense would have prevailed, but it was pretty savage by the critics. I will say, having been a film and TV critic for myself for a number of years, I don't listen to critics. So even if I had read those before I saw it, I wouldn't have listened. I would have just gone and seen it. But I mean, that really colored, I think, a lot of people's perception. I saw it opening day and went back a week later, I confess, to see it again, to see if maybe I was just misremembering how bad it was. And both times, granted, I was in a small town in North Carolina in the US, but I was literally, I think there were 2 other people in the theater opening day. And when I went a week later, I had the theater completely to myself. So I don't know if, like me, people just didn't know it was out, or if the, critical lambasting really played a part in keeping people away. I think, though, it did fairly decently at the box office, maybe made even. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, it was pretty well savaged at the time. And as I said, based on the reviews, rightly so, for the version that we had at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if, speaking of the alternate versions, I don't remember if the British theatrical version had all of the flashbacks as a prologue at the beginning of the movie. The creation of the shield and Brenda dying, that was at the beginning of the US version. There were no flashbacks.
The start of the UK version was the same.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you make a movie that attempts to explain this mythos, and at the same time, you make something that, other than a couple big sword fighting scenes and beheadings, is completely different in tone and structure to the previous movie, which was a success. You're kind of really setting yourself up for failure and to rightly get criticized. Again, though, obviously the people in Argentina that were writing the checks had no idea what constituted a good Highlander film.
No.
Or a good film for that matter. I mean, again, I can't, whether it was the editor or the producers, but 2 fight scenes together like that and goes, nobody will notice. It'll be fine. I don't get it. Maybe that was like what really started my love for the movie, because seeing the Renegade version, like, okay, now that we have it set up so where it makes sense, it's actually not a bad film.
Exactly.
Yeah. And good editing is the core of the movie. George Lucas will tell you that. I think I don't know if we've brought up the extended Zeiss cut that's supposedly maybe floating around out there that some of us might have seen. That seems to throw every deleted and alternate scene into the movie. And I can tell you that if that had been released to theaters or that been the Renegade version, I would absolutely hate the movie because to me, it was like, there's when the extended cuts of the Highlander series episodes were released on DVD, there's like one episode where they literally spend 8 minutes on Richie parking a car. That's what this extended Zeiss cut felt to me. I'm like, what? You're giving me stuff I don't even care about and stuff that I'm going to fall asleep if I'm in a darkened theater watching. So again, more is not always best.
Yeah.
Well,
we kind of covered that a little bit in the last episode, in a way, I think, when we were talking about the deleted scenes for the original movie.
Yeah.
By this, I mean, there was some amazing stuff that we saw in that, and knowing that they shot things like, Nash Antiques burning down, and the whole sort of additional ending bit with Moran and Rachel, but I really think that would have taken away all of the drama of that final fight.
Yeah.
That we saw, and it would have just felt very Return of the Kingsy, kind of just drag on. There's another ending, and now it's done.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said for, as you say, for editing, and as much as fans, it's nice to feel like we want to see everything, and well, you shot it must be involved in the movie, but not always the case.
I think if it had been properly edited on release, it would have had better critical acclaim, maybe not acclaim across the board, but I think it would have been received and critiqued much better than it was. I mean, based on even some of the reviews that from fans and film critics when the Renegade version came out, it was looked at far more favorably then. I mean, I think some of them reviewing it were still had the taste of the theatrical version, so they maybe I don't think they were as kind as they could have been, but I think if we had properly edited and a better paced version initially, it would be much better regarded nowadays. So
I agree. So bearing in mind, we know what we think about it. We know what everybody else thought about it. What would you have done differently? So it's the return of the 5-minute pitch. So what everybody needs to do is give me your 5-minute pitch, and if you go over that time, you will hear this noise. Yep, that's the Guardian telling you that you need to hurry up or you will die. I mean, you probably won't, but it's fine. But still for dramatic purposes and all that. So let's start with Rob. I would like to hear your 5-minute pitch for what a Highlander sequel that you would have pitched instead of Zeist Madness. And your time starts now.
Instead of Zeist Madness. Damn it. Basically, I would have filmed in Scotland again. That could have immensely saved the movie from pretty much anything. I would have filmed it in Scotland. I would have done pretty much the same as the first movie, but told a similar story, except it would have been like Highlander 3, trapped in a cave, or he's lost under ice, Captain Americaized or something. Just basically, there's one you forgot about.
Right, yeah.
But a little bit of the prize, not the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this guy in a cave or this guy under the ice, whatever it is, basically just did the same thing again. Because the first film ended, that's it. It ended, it's over, it's done. Going for a sequel, and now a franchise that has spawned multiple sequels, multiple television shows, animated shows, comics, books, and stuff like that, considering its longevity, I would have done something different, something very similar to Highlander 3. But other than that, yeah, that's what I'd have done.
I've got to call this like 2-minute pitch next time because we're all coming way under. Well done. Yes, you avoided the Guardian for a second time. Congratulations. Joe, you're up next. Go.
Okay, so as a sequel to Highlander that was a movie with no sequel, again, I have spies in Rob's production studio. So I would have pitched 2 sequels. I would have pitched the second movie would be basically getting to see Connor, what he did with the prize, what it actually means, him attempting to better humanity. And at the same time, much like Highlander 3, we have someone that's unearthed and wakes up in a cave that's immortal, and he's immortal again. And he has to deal with that. And that sets up, that's going to set up the third sequel, the third cool, where, you know, in attempting to help humanity, he does, you know, learn the lesson because of the ozone layer going and climate change. His wife gets sick and dies, and he's going to save humanity from itself and builds the shield. And so then we end up in the third, you know, big triumphant ending. He's, you know, constructed the shield, he saved humanity, all's going to be well. And then we cut to the third movie where it pretty much goes as in what happened in The Quickening, except I would probably pull out all the Zeiss stuff. Any flashbacks would be more flashbacks again to his past and, you know, sword fighting days. And that's probably where I would have brought in Ramirez somehow, you know, have them having a couple conversations from before Ramirez died. Because I get the sense in the first movie he, you know, was with them for a little while. So that's where I would have brought back Sean Connery, not in the quote unquote present day. And then the movie, you know, ends with him, you know, changing his ways and destroying the shield, no drifting off into space, no decision to return to another planet or the distant past. He's, you know, once again, the one. And, you know, maybe we have immortals wake up again, so that he's immortal in the third one, since we kind of set that up in the second one, or continue on that same villain from the second one to the third one. But again, you know, close it out on a happy ending. He's once again has the prize and he vows to do better to help humanity, and that's it. And then no more movies or TV series. Although I do have a pitch for the entire franchise that would have made more sense. So, but maybe that's for another
Well,
time.
I'd like to make an addendum to mine, though. Something I just thought of. The climate change has melted the polar ice caps, and suddenly there's an entire village of immortals.
Like, woohoo! We're alive!
Yes.
Wow, that was a long time.
Yeah. Well, not for them, you know.
No, exactly. All right. Okay. So my idea for a sequel is fairly easy for me, because ultimately the name Highlander Heart comes from my pitch for a sequel, which I think I sent to Davis Panzer many years ago after Highlander 2, but I will tailor it more for this. So Connor has won the prize, and he's married to Brenda, and he's mortal, so she becomes pregnant, and she has this child. But during childbirth, there's a massive electrical storm, and she dies in childbirth, and this boy is born amidst this giant electrical storm, and thus immortality, immortals, the whole thing, the whole shebang begins anew. So it's a cyclical thing, where, you know, every time you get to the end, and then you can, you know, either humanity suffers, you know, darkness, or it's not an eternity, it's just until the next one, or light. So so then this kid, I think I call him Alexander, grows up in the Highlands of Hollywood in Los Angeles. And so he's playing baseball with his buddies and whatever, and they call him Highlander because he's kind of from the Highlands of sort of that area. And this shows how old this pitch is. That Brendan Fraser was my pick for Alexander, and this is back in the kind of Encino Man days, or California Man if you're from the UK like we are. The only problem with adapting this pitch to not including the series is I lose my mentor. But effectively what happens is Connor realizes that the Immortals are starting to spring up again. And he also realizes that Alexander is one of them. So knowing that an Immortal becomes immortal once they have a violent death, and knowing that he's at his peak age in terms of just, physicality and everything like that, he has to make the alternate price. And he does so, and he drives his Porsche with Alex in the car off a cliff, and Connor dies, and Alex effectively receives his quickening to a degree, and becomes immortal, but has no clue what's going on. Now, in the version that includes a series, Duncan shows up and is his mentor. And that comes about through the revelation, which borrows a little bit from the animated series, where you don't have to lose your head to pass on the quickening. You can pass it on from one to the other. But, bad guys got bored. They didn't wait for that. Like these kind of sage kind of immortals wouldn't pass their knowledge onto them. So they just took the head and took it anyway. And that just became part of the lore, even though that wasn't actually what needed to happen. And within the confines of the series, that they would have figured that out, and Duncan ultimately passed on his knowledge to Connor in a kind of roundabout face of what wound up happening in Endgame, and became mortal so that he could live, because that's what he wanted to do. But because he knows the game, he knows about it, he came on board as a mentor. So I don't know what to do about the mentor thing in this pitch, so I'm kind of cheating slightly. But ultimately, that's the setup. And what happens is the film actually starts in the future. So it starts in a kind of very kind of, I guess, Blade Runner-y type future. Kind of similar to my reboot idea in a way that it effectively starts at the end, with this kind of impending duel between two people, one of them being Alex, but maybe you don't see him at the beginning. You assume maybe it's Connor. And then by the end of the first sequel, there's a setup between Alex and this immortal friend that have actually were friends, become enemies. And the threequel is set in the future with flashbacks from the point of the first film up to that point through time, as they're sort of fighting up to the point where, so it's effectively the first, like the first Highlander movie, but set in the future, but all the flashbacks are of effectively our future, but not their future, culminating in the end of that prize. It's kind of, I guess, is a little bit kind of like what's it called, the Carbon thing on Netflix, a little bit of an aspect of
Carbon. Yeah.
Thank you, Altered Carbon. Yeah, a little bit of an aspect of that to it in a way, thinking about it. Oh God, the Guardians got me. No. Well, yeah, there you go. Well, it's been great revisiting Highlander 2 again, and I genuinely hope that anybody who's sat through this, and if you have, thank you, feels the same, that they will maybe want to revisit the movie with fresh eyes. I think I was thinking about this, one of the main differences between our experience and people of our age, and potentially either a younger audience or an audience that has come to Highlander at a different time later on, is that they have all of these things in a row set up to watch from the get-go. So they're going to watch Highlander, they're going to watch Highlander 2, scratch their heads, they're going to watch Highlander 3, really scratch their heads, Highlander 4, and then Highlander 5, like what? You know, but they're going to go from one to the next in quick succession. Whereas I think, like I said, from my experience anyway, was very much anticipation and building from 1 to 2, and then sort of, you know, sort of accepting that for what it is and whatever. So I'm hoping that people can maybe take a look at Highlander 2 now with fresh eyes.
What would be interesting to hear from is maybe anyone whose first exposure to Highlander was Highlander 2. I mean, there's got to have been people that saw Highlander 2 without seeing the first one, because I mean, there wasn't a readily available way to see movie. I mean, VHS was kind of coming in at that point.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there wasn't a widely available way to see past movies, maybe on TV or something like that. But there's got to have been somebody out there that even stayed with the franchise that saw this movie for the first time in the theater. That'd be interesting to hear their perspective.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that I can't imagine seeing it that way around. They'd be like, because genuinely they might have been, especially if they'd seen a Renegade one first and not the awfully cut together one, they might be like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is interesting. I wonder how this started out. You know, and then watch the first one and kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, that's. Yeah.
Or there could have been someone that saw it in the theater, Highlander 2 in the theater, and then finally tracked down the first one and was like, where's the aliens? I was hoping to get more about that. What the hell? You know? So.
I'm sorry, but if you watched Highlander 2 from the start and then went on to something else, how did you get by Highlander 2 and enjoy it?
There's got to have been someone.
There's got to have been. I mean, yeah, let's go see the second film before the first, you know?
Well, who knows? It may have happened. You don't, you know, as Joe said, you know, if they didn't manage to grab a copy on VHS, you know, if they hadn't seen it and they just happened to be at the cinema, you know, or even if a partner took them and they'd never seen the first one and they saw the second first, you know.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of reasons that could work.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Well, yeah, as always with these things, you know, we're on YouTube, people. You know, like and subscribe and put your comments down below and let us know your thoughts and whether that happened to you. That'd be pretty cool. All right. Well, look, I want to take us out on some one of the paragraphs from John Barley's kind of review in essence of Highlander. It wasn't really a review. It was more of a kind of an overview, I think. But I really like what he says here and kind of the way it ends. So he said, make no mistake, Highlander 2 is absolutely bonkers. And I love that an American used that word. But that remains its greatest strength. Since later installments ignored it anyway, its impact on the ongoing Highlander mythology is zero. This leaves us free to enjoy it for what it is, a fun, alternative universe adventure with the characters and actors and action that we've come to expect from the best of Highlander, visually and narratively expressed in ways that are entirely unique among the franchise. Ebert might have called it the most hilariously incomprehensible movie I've seen in many a long day, and almost awesome in its badness. But the first line of his review remains the truest. This movie has to be seen to be believed. Now Highlander 2 is a film not ripe for redemption or remembrance, but for rediscovery. And I hope that everybody feels the same and goes and puts on the right cut and maybe rediscovers it again. So, yeah. So in lieu of having an extra guest, I will just see us out on this one. Thank you everyone for watching. It's been a pleasure for us just to sit and talk about Highlander, so I hope it's been half as good at least for you guys. And until we see you next time, remember, hold fast and don't lose your head.